As we pause to reflect on the last month, it is important to acknowledge the faithfulness of God in ways that often go unnoticed. Many people rush into the next season without stopping to recognize the victories, breakthroughs, and divine interventions that have already occurred. Yet, it is in reflection that faith deepens and hope is renewed. Look back at the moments when what seemed impossible suddenly became possible, when challenges that felt overwhelming were quietly resolved, and when doors you thought were closed opened in unexpected ways. These are not coincidences, they are the fingerprints of God's mercy and power. Even in times of delay, when answers seemed slow or circumstances appeared bleak, His hand was moving behind the scenes. Recognizing God's faithfulness in the past month strengthens your confidence for the present and prepares your heart to receive even greater blessings. It reminds you that nothing you have endured or accomplished was outside His divine plan, and that every answered prayer, every moment of provision, and every protection granted was evidence that He is actively orchestrating your life. Often, the most significant miracles happen in ways we cannot immediately see or understand. God's interventions are frequently behind the scenes, invisible to human eyes, yet decisive in their impact. A setback that appears painful may actually be God's protection. A door that seems closed may be a divine redirection towards something far better. Many believers only recognize God's hand after the results manifest. But the truth is that He has been working all along. I have witnessed countless situations where the outcome seemed delayed or uncertain, only for God to reveal that His timing was perfect and His strategy flawless. These unseen interventions teach patience and cultivate trust, because they remind us that God is not limited by our perspective or timeline. He orchestrates events in ways that humans cannot anticipate, and when the full picture is revealed, it magnifies His glory. Understanding this encourages believers to move forward with faith, even when circumstances appear contrary, knowing that the unseen hand of God is shaping the outcomes in their favor. Gratitude is one of the most powerful spiritual forces a believer can engage, yet it is often underestimated. Thanksgiving is not merely a response to what God has done, it is a declaration of trust in who He is. When you deliberately thank God for the miracles and blessings of the last month, you are acknowledging His sovereignty and affirming that your life is under divine control. I have learned that gratitude shifts the posture of the heart from entitlement to humility, and it is in that place of humility that God releases more grace. Complaints silence faith, but gratitude amplifies it. When you choose to give thanks even for victories that seemed small or answers that came quietly, you create room for greater manifestations of God's power. Thanksgiving turns memories into testimonies and past blessings into seeds for future breakthroughs. It aligns your spirit with heaven's perspective, causing your faith to rise and your expectation to be renewed for what God is still preparing to do. Gratitude is a powerful spiritual force that many people underestimate. It is more than saying thank you. It is a deliberate acknowledgement of God's involvement in your life. When you give thanks, you are declaring that you recognize God as the source of your help, your progress, and your preservation. I have learned that thanksgiving keeps the heart soft and the spirit sensitive to God. It prevents entitlement and silences complaints that weaken faith. When you intentionally thank God for the miracles and blessings of the last month, both the obvious and the hidden, you position yourself for increase. Gratitude multiplies what remains. It shifts your focus from what is lacking to what is working, and that shift alone can transform your emotional and spiritual state. Many doors remain closed not because God is unwilling, but because gratitude has not prepared the heart to steward more. When thanksgiving becomes a lifestyle, favor begins to chase you and blessings flow with less resistance, because your heart is aligned with humility and honor toward God. There is also a wisdom that comes from recognizing patterns in how God blesses you. God is consistent even when his methods appear diverse. If you observe closely, you will notice repeated themes in how he provides, protects, and promotes you. It may be through certain people, specific opportunities, timely ideas, or strategic delays that later reveal their purpose. These patterns are divine signals meant to train your discernment. When you identify them, you begin to cooperate with God more intelligently. You learn when to move, when to wait, when to pray harder, and when to simply trust. Recognizing patterns of favor builds confidence because you realize that God's goodness toward you is not accidental. It is intentional, measured, and purposeful. This awareness eliminates fear of the future because you understand that the same God who has been faithful repeatedly will remain faithful again. It strengthens your expectation and helps you prepare your heart, character, and capacity for the next level of blessing he intends to release. Gratitude is a spiritual force that many underestimate, yet it carries the power to shift seasons and open doors. When you give thanks, you are not merely reacting to what God has done, you are aligning yourself with who he is. Gratitude acknowledges God as the source, not circumstances, people, or personal effort. I have seen that those who master thanksgiving rarely struggle to see God's hand again because gratitude multiplies what it recognizes. When you thank God sincerely for the blessings of the last month, even the small ones, your heart becomes sensitive to his presence. Complaints silence faith, but gratitude amplifies it. Thanksgiving turns past victories into prophetic declarations for the future. It trains your spirit to expect good, to speak life, and to maintain hope even when answers seem delayed. A grateful heart attracts divine attention and positions a believer for increase because God entrusts more to those who honor him for what he has already done. As you reflect further, you begin to notice that God often blesses in patterns rather than isolated moments. There are repeated themes in his dealings with you. Certain doors that keep opening, certain helpers that appear at strategic moments, certain victories that follow obedience. These patterns are not accidental. They are invitations to discernment. When you recognize patterns of favor, you gain wisdom for alignment. You begin to understand what pleases God, what positions you for increase, and what attracts divine support. Many people miss their next miracle because they fail to study the last one. God teaches through repetition, and when you pay attention, you learn how to cooperate with his grace. Recognizing these patterns strengthens your confidence because you realize that God's goodness toward you is intentional, consistent, and deeply personal. Now, stepping into the new month demands bold expectation rooted in evidence, not emotion. The miracles and blessings of the last month are proof that God is active in your life, not distant or indifferent. Do not approach the future with fear or uncertainty as though God has suddenly changed his mind about you. Faith is sustained by remembrance. When you remember what God has done, courage rises within you to trust him again. Let past testimonies shape present prayers and future decisions. Enter the new month with a mindset of readiness, obedience, and confidence. Speak with assurance, pray with authority, and act with wisdom, knowing that the same God who carried you through the last month is already present in the days ahead. Expect increase, expect guidance, expect divine alignment, because the evidence of yesterday is the guarantee of tomorrow. Gratitude is a spiritual force that shifts atmospheres and positions a believer for increase. When you consciously thank God for what he has already done, you are declaring that you recognize his hand and trust his intentions. Thanksgiving is not based on convenience. It is an act of faith that acknowledges God's sovereignty regardless of circumstances. Many times, people focus on what is missing and overlook what has already been provided. But gratitude recalibrates their heart. It reminds you that if God has done it once, he can do it again and even greater. I have seen how a grateful heart attracts peace, clarity, and favor. When you thank God for the miracles and blessings of the last month, you are not just remembering history. You are creating spiritual momentum that opens the door for future manifestations of His goodness. As you reflect further, you begin to notice that God's blessings often follow patterns. Certain doors open in similar ways. Help comes repeatedly from unexpected places, or favor shows up at critical moments. These are not accidents, they are divine signatures. God leaves patterns so that His children can learn to trust Him more deeply. When you recognize these patterns, fear loses its grip because you realize that your life is not random. There is order, intention, and divine orchestration at work. Understanding patterns of favor helps you align your expectations with God's ways, allowing you to prepare mentally, spiritually, and emotionally for what He is about to do. It also builds discernment, helping you cooperate with grace rather than resist it through doubt or unbelief. Moving forward requires intentional faith. The blessings of the last month are not meant to become memories alone. They are meant to become fuel. Faith grows strongest when it is anchored in evidence, and your past testimonies are proof that God is reliable. When you step into a new season carrying confidence from what God has already done, your prayers change, your posture changes, and your expectations shift. You no longer ask timidly, you pray boldly. You no longer walk cautiously, you move with assurance. This kind of faith positions you to receive more because it aligns your heart with heaven's perspective rather than earthly limitations. Finally, there is a call to action that comes from reflection, gratitude, and recognition. You are invited to step forward with courage, obedience, and expectancy. The same God who intervened last month is still present, still powerful, and still committed to your destiny. Let the evidence of His faithfulness silence every voice of doubt and fear. Choose to walk with confidence, speak with conviction, and act with boldness. When you respond to God's goodness with faith-filled action, you turn reflection into transformation, gratitude into increase, and expectation into living testimony. Gratitude is one of the most powerful spiritual forces available to a believer, yet it is often underestimated. Thanksgiving is not merely a response to blessings. It is a declaration that you recognize God as the source of your life and victories. When you intentionally give thanks for the last month, you are telling your soul to remember that God has been faithful even when things were unclear. Gratitude shifts your focus from what is missing to what has already been provided, and this shift realigns your heart with heaven. I have seen repeatedly that people who master thanksgiving rarely remain stuck because gratitude creates spiritual momentum. It softens the heart, sharpens spiritual sensitivity, and opens channels for more grace to flow. When you thank God genuinely, you turn past miracles into seeds for future breakthroughs, and your atmosphere becomes charged with expectation rather than complaint. There is also a wisdom that comes from recognizing patterns of divine favor in your life. God is intentional, and His blessings often follow spiritual laws and principles. When you look back over the last month, you may notice repeated help in certain areas. Timely provision, strategic connections, unusual peace, or consistent protection. These patterns are not accidents. They are indicators of where God's hand is actively at work. Recognizing them helps you discern what God is emphasizing in your life. It teaches you where to invest your faith, your prayers, and your obedience. When you understand these patterns, you stop living randomly and begin to cooperate intelligently with God's grace, positioning yourself for sustained results rather than temporary victories. Another vital truth is that miracles are not only dramatic events. Many are gradual processes that unfold over time. Some blessings come quietly, growing day by day until one moment you realize you are standing in what you once prayed for. If you only look for sudden breakthroughs, you may miss the steady transformation God has been working within you. Strength of character, clarity of vision, emotional healing, and spiritual maturity are all miracles in themselves. These internal victories prepare you to handle external blessings without losing alignment. The last month may have shaped you more than you realize, equipping you with wisdom, resilience, and discernment for the season ahead. As you move forward, it is important to understand that remembrance fuels expectation. When you deliberately recall what God has done, your faith is activated for what He is about to do. Faith is strengthened by evidence, and your past testimonies are proof that God is reliable. The same God who showed up last month has not changed. He is consistent in power, faithful in character, and intentional in purpose. Carrying this awareness into the new season empowers you to pray boldly, think expansively, and act confidently. Because you are no longer guessing whether God can do it, you know He already has. Stepping into the next phase requires courage that is rooted in trust, not arrogance. Trust comes from knowing God's track record in your life. When fear tries to intimidate you about the future, reflection silences it. You can say with confidence that if God sustained you, guided you, and protected you in the last month, He is more than able to do even greater things ahead. This confidence does not deny challenges. It simply refuses to be dominated by them. It allows you to move forward with peace, stability, and hope, regardless of what lies ahead. Finally, allow the miracles and blessings of the last month to redefine your expectations. Do not lower your faith or settle for survival when God is calling you into abundance. Let your gratitude turn into bold declarations, your reflection turn into vision, and your remembrance turn into anticipation. God does not reveal His faithfulness so that you admire it from a distance. He does so that you trust Him more deeply and walk more boldly. What He has done is proof of what He can still do. And what He can still do is far greater than what you have already seen. Gratitude is a spiritual force that unlocks dimensions many prayers alone cannot access. When a believer learns to thank God deliberately, even for what seems small, something powerful happens within the heart. Thanksgiving shifts your focus from what is lacking to what God has already done, and this perspective fuels faith. I have seen people pray for years with little clarity, yet the moment gratitude became their lifestyle, direction and peace followed. Gratitude tells heaven that you recognize God's hand in your life and that you are prepared for more. It silences complaints, weakens fear, and aligns your spirit with divine supply. When you thank God for the last month, you are not just remembering history. You are activating momentum for the future. One of the marks of spiritual maturity is the ability to recognize patterns of divine favor. God often repeats certain blessings to teach us His ways and reveal His covenant nature. When you observe your life closely, you may notice that help comes from unexpected people or opportunities appear just when you need them most. These patterns are not accidents, they are lessons. They show you how God chooses to bless you, guide you, and preserve you. When you discern these patterns, your confidence in God deepens and your faith becomes intelligent rather than emotional. You stop panicking because you understand that God has a consistent way of showing up in your life. Many people miss future miracles because they fail to interpret past ones correctly. If you treat what God did last month as a random event, you weaken your expectation for what He can do next. But when you see past blessings as evidence of God's character, your faith becomes bold. Faith grows when memory is sanctified. Recalling how God came through before gives you strength to stand when new challenges arise. It trains your spirit to expect victory even before the battle begins. This is why testimony is powerful. It reminds your soul that God is reliable. Stepping into a new month requires intentional faith. You cannot enter the future carrying fear from the past. The miracles of the last month are proof that God is ahead of you. When you move with expectation, your prayers change tone, your decisions carry confidence, and your actions align with purpose. Faith-filled expectation prepares you to recognize opportunities quickly and respond with courage. It positions you to partner with God rather than merely react to circumstances. Expectation is the atmosphere where miracles thrive. Another vital lesson is understanding that growth often happens quietly. Not every blessing comes with noise or public celebration. Some of the most significant shifts occur internally: clarity of purpose, strength of character, renewed passion, and deeper trust in God. These internal miracles prepare you for visible breakthroughs. If God gave you peace where there was once anxiety, wisdom where there was confusion, or endurance where there was weariness, do not take it lightly. These are foundations for greater elevation. God often stabilizes a person inwardly before promoting them outwardly. As you reflect on the last month, let your heart be filled with confidence rather than regret. Whatever did not happen did not defeat you, it trained you. Whatever happened did not exalt you, it refined you. God's dealings with you are intentional, and His plans are precise. When you carry this understanding, you move forward without bitterness, fear, or hesitation. You walk knowing that the same God who preserved you, guided you, and blessed you before is actively involved in shaping what comes next. This awareness becomes strength, and that strength becomes the platform for the next dimension of favor. Gratitude is a spiritual force that multiplies whatever it touches. Many people desire more blessings, yet overlook the power of thanksgiving for what has already been received. When you deliberately thank God for the miracles and blessings of the last month, you acknowledge His sovereignty and invite His continued involvement in your life. Gratitude shifts your focus from what is missing to what has been supplied, and this shift transforms your spiritual atmosphere. I have seen people trapped in cycles of frustration simply because they ignored past victories, while others moved from glory to glory because they learned to honor God for every step forward. Thanksgiving aligns your heart with heaven's agenda, silences complaints, and positions you to receive more. When you thank God sincerely, you are declaring that you trust His process, His timing, and His intentions. And this declaration opens doors that effort alone could never open. Another dimension many believers overlook is the ability to recognize patterns of divine favor. God is intentional, and His blessings often follow discernible paths. When you observe your life closely, you may notice recurring help, repeated opportunities, or consistent protection in specific areas. These patterns are not random, they are evidence of divine alignment. Recognizing them gives you spiritual intelligence. It helps you know where God is emphasizing His grace and where He is inviting you to cooperate more deeply with His purpose. Those who discern these patterns grow stronger in faith because they no longer see blessings as accidents, but as part of a divine strategy. When you recognize patterns of favor, you stop living in surprise and begin living in expectation. Expectation is the bridge between what God has done and what He is about to do. Entering a new season without expectation is like sowing seed without anticipating harvest. The miracles of the last month were not meant to end as memories. They were designed to fuel your faith for what lies ahead. When you carry expectation, your prayers become bold, your declarations become confident, and your actions become aligned with faith. Expectation does not ignore reality, but it places God above circumstances. It declares that if He did it before, He can do it again and even greater. Those who live with expectation are never stagnant because their hearts are always prepared to receive. Boldness is required to step fully into the next phase of God's plan. Reflection and gratitude must lead to action. Many people admire testimonies yet hesitate to walk in courage. Boldness is not arrogance, it is confidence rooted in past evidence of God's faithfulness. When you remember how God helped you last month, you gain strength to confront new challenges. Fear loses its grip when faith is reinforced by experience. Each miracle you have witnessed becomes a weapon against doubt. Bold faith dares to believe that the next level is possible and that God is actively involved in bringing it to pass. Obedience remains a critical key to sustaining blessings. Miracles are wonderful, but alignment keeps them flowing. God often uses seasons of blessing to test maturity. Will you remain faithful, disciplined, and humble when things improve? The last month may have brought relief, provision, or breakthrough, but sustaining it requires continued obedience. Obedience protects what prayer produces. When you walk in alignment with God's word, you create an environment where blessings are preserved and multiplied. This is how testimonies become lifestyles rather than isolated events. Consistency in faith is what turns moments into movements. Many believers experience God powerfully, but struggle to maintain spiritual momentum. The lessons, victories, and insights of the last month must be carried forward intentionally. Faith grows when it is practiced daily, not occasionally. Prayer, gratitude, and obedience must become habits, not reactions. When consistency is established, spiritual growth becomes inevitable. You stop depending on emotional highs and begin walking in stable confidence, knowing that God's presence is not seasonal but continual. Finally, understanding that God is not finished with you is essential. The miracles and blessings of the last month were not the destination. They were signs along the journey. God reveals His goodness progressively, preparing you for greater responsibility, impact, and influence. Each blessing carries an assignment, and each miracle invites deeper trust. When you embrace this truth, you move forward with humility and anticipation, knowing that your story is still unfolding. What God has done is proof of what He can do, and what He is about to do will exceed what you have already seen if you remain faithful, grateful, and expectant.